New. We are live. Okay, cool. That was close. All right, cool. Thanks for being here, the people who are here. Izonic, I don't know how you pronounce your name, but I'm going to answer your question first because you're here and I can't see anyone else. So yours is here somewhere. When you've reached the intermediate stage, which I think I soon will, would you recommend a lot of input or expanding vocabulary through traditional methods? Very simple answer, a lot of input. Don't bother with traditional methods. I'm assuming you mean like textbooks and vocabulary lists and stuff. You can use vocabulary lists, but get them from your input. I wouldn't normally be that flat with a recommendation. Hi, everyone. Hummingbird makes hello. Yeah, lots of input. I'm going to say that probably quite a few times in this stream for people who are asking stuff. Thanks, Jamal, on the congratulations. Thank you. Definitely input. Don't bother with textbooks and stuff unless that's what really gets you into it. But Sander Jansson, do you speak a Scandinavian language, Sander? I have never used Asimal, no. I don't necessarily recommend against it, but I've never ever used it, so I wouldn't know. Okay, cool. I'm going to get straight into some other questions. Thanks, guys, for being here. Oh, it's popping. Thanks, Ethan, for letting me know. I'm just going to take this mic down here. That might help. No. Okay, so Sander, if I answered in Swedish, you wouldn't understand me, but you might understand some things. I'm just going to take the mic down here. Sorry about the delay, guys. Hopefully that... Oh, it might even... Every time I try this, I've got a problem with a mic. It's either last time I used my camera mic and it was peaking because it was like right in front of me, and this time I'm using just a, what do you call it? Lapel mic. And this mic's just not like great. It's good when it works, but it doesn't work reliably. So please let me know and bear with me if the mic keeps popping. Okay. I won't be able to get to all the questions in the chat because we've got a few that people were nice enough to send me through on Instagram. Thanks everyone for being here, but yeah. Brianna on Instagram asks, in your recent video about mistakes you made, you talked about how the more fluent you get, the more aware you become of what you still don't know. How do you cope with that sense? Do you think it's a matter of truly learning the language, or Aviv, sorry guys. So people are telling me that the audio is not good, which is... It doesn't sound like it's peaked. If anyone knows sound stuff, can you tell me if it sounds like it's peaking or just popping? Okay. I'm just going to have to keep going because I can't change it midstream. Okay, so yeah, about mistakes you made, you talk about how the more fluent you get, the more aware you become of what you still don't know. How do you cope with that sense? Do you think it's a matter of truly learning more, or getting comfortable with yourself in the language, whatever the level may be, or both? Yes, both. So Brianna is referring to this sense that like you never really feel better at a language because as you get better, that just becomes the new normal. So you never feel like you've mastered a language because, yeah, you might be twice as good as you were even a couple of months ago, which would be super quick progress, but you never really feel that because it just becomes normal. I like to think of it, Matt versus Japan talks about like your performance in a language versus your competence in the language, and your performance can never exceed your competence. So your competence is how much you know, your performance is what you're actually doing when you try and speak the language. Your performance can be very good on a particular day, but that just means your performance was closer to your competence than normal. So as you raise your competence, that is your knowledge of the language, which you mainly get through input, your performance should also be raised as you practice more. So that is practicing performing more, but it will never exceed your competence. The days that you feel like on fire in the language are just like the days you feel on fire in sport. You never actually play sport better than you are able to play it, if that makes sense. So you can only ever play it as good as you are at that sport, as well as your talent in that sport. But the days that you feel on fire are just days that you basically got to your maximum level of performance. So sometimes that can happen in a language. I found that meditating right before I need to speak the language. I know that's not always practical if you're living in the country or something, but if it's an iTalki lesson, if I meditate right before, then I'm just sort of out of my own head, if that's a good way to put it. Like, I'm not sitting there going, oh, did I say that right? Did I say that right? I'm just like in a bit of a zone. So that can help. But again, that only helps with my performance in that particular lesson. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm better at the language. So you've got to raise both. So as you get better at it, as you get a better competence through more input, then you also want to speak a little bit to bump that up as well. Until it's just when you think about it, it's just the same thing as your native language on a lower level. So I don't always perform at my best in English. Sometimes I say things that I'm like, yeah, that was good. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Other times I'm like, oh, what is it I'm trying to say here? And it's exactly the same in Swedish. It just feels very different because you're at a very different level. But it doesn't really matter. Even if you're at like A1, you can sometimes still get your performance to match your competence, which is when you feel really good. So you just have to keep going, basically. But meditation's the only kind of hack that I would recommend. Yeah, I don't know. For the people, it's weird because I was using a different mic last time and people said it's still popping. So I don't know, maybe it's even my computer sound card or something. I'm not sure. I'll do some of the questions because this is a live and I wanted it to be a bit more relaxed than. Lingua e passioni. Ciao, LAMONT. Grazie. I'm guessing that's how you say thank you in Italian. Thanks for being here, man. Really like your channel. Yeah. Okay, cool. Whoa, lots of people here. Stort gratis, tack. The mic isn't connected. The mic is connected because I can see it in the YouTube settings that says that I'm using that mic. Oh yeah, David Bennett, why did you choose Swedish as a language to start learning? I'm studying Finnish because my mum's side of Finnish and many family members there. Well, good on you, David, for studying Finnish. I have talked about this in a video before, but it's like, I know that not everyone has seen every video. In fact, no one has seen all of my videos. That would probably not be a very good use of your time. I chose Swedish because of a Finnish woman who stayed with us here in Australia for like a couple of days, and then she went to New Zealand, then she came back and stayed for a couple of days more. But it was kind of random because we didn't exactly know her before she stayed with us. So she felt really grateful and we all had a good time together. And on her way back to the airport, she just sort of said, you guys should come and stay with me in Finland sometime. And that wasn't going to happen like next week. It was going to be a while away. So we were like, yeah, we're going to go to Scandinavia, or the Nordic countries. And the obvious choice would be Finnish, right? Because that's where we knew we were going. But at the same time, I was like, it would make more sense to learn Swedish because a few people in Finland speak Swedish. I know not very many, but it is an official language there. Swedish is mutually intelligible in Norway. I did that research at the time, but I don't think I did it very well. I just kind of went, Swedish seems like it'd be mutually intelligible with some of the others, whereas Finnish doesn't seem like that. So I just chose Swedish, and there wasn't really any particular rhyme or reason to it. I just did, and here we are. Okay, I'm going to get to more questions that I was asked, just so people don't feel let down if they were asked. Sankar, I think from India or the subcontinent, asks, how do you manage to buy Swedish books in Australia? I'm not able to buy any Dutch books where I live, and so if you told me what you do, well, I buy them from a shop called Bokus, which is a Swedish shop. Lucas Jagger, streaming from Australia, probably sucks. Yeah, probably. Okay, so Sankar's question. I buy them from a Swedish bookshop called Bokus. They have books in a couple of languages. I don't think they're shipping overseas at the moment because of everything anyway, but generally I've found that you can work it out so that shipping isn't crazy expensive. But yeah, it's a Swedish bookshop. They do have books in, like some books in Dutch, but that's how I do it. I would find a Dutch bookshop, like Google bookshop in Dutch. Like don't Google it in English, basically. And you just have to pay a bit for shipping. Like it's not the cheapest way to do it. A cheaper way to do it would be something like Bookmate. They do have books in Dutch. They have books in some like unusual languages, which is why I recommend them. But that's an ebook platform. But there are lots of ebook platforms. But for ebooks in Dutch, the only one I know of is Bookmate, because they have. When I say unusual languages, I mean ones for which the people probably speak English. So it's generally harder to find books in some of those languages. Yeah. That's all I can recommend. Bokus.com, which is a Swedish bookshop. They may have some books in Dutch, but it's probably not the best way to do it. Google books in Dutch. Google bookshop, but in Dutch. Okay, so whoops. I've missed someone's question there because I miscopied the question. Tanjaman, if that's a Scandinavian name, that's how I'm going to pronounce it, Tanjaman, or Tanjman. What has your experience with iTalki been like, and do you have any tips or tricks for someone who might be new to using iTalki? And then David M asks, how do you usually plan out and conduct your sessions with language tutors on iTalki? I wouldn't recommend this approach. I often book a lesson when it's convenient for me to have a lesson. So normally the night before I don't have work, because if I have work, then I have to get up really early, and I don't book lessons then. And often they rush up on me and I end up having the conversation quite unprepared. And so I just chat, basically. But I wouldn't recommend it that way, especially if you don't have a lot of lessons. I have a lot of lessons on iTalki, so it doesn't really matter for me that much. But if you don't have money for a lot of lessons, tips and tricks, there's no real if you're at a low level, book a tutor. Don't do language exchanges, because language exchanges, if the person speaks better English than you speak their language, it just winds up with you speaking a lot of English or being kind of feeling very unhelpful for the other person and feeling awkward. And a lesson just removes all that. And there's this thing of like, they have to speak the language to you because they're being paid. So that's really my only tip or trick. I've got a video called How to Choose iTalki Tutors that's goes into a little bit more detail about it, but you just it's just a sense you have to develop a little bit for yourself. There's nothing I can really tell you. Yeah, that's not a very good answer, but that's about, I don't have heaps of tips or tricks for how to use iTalki. How do you usually plan out? Okay, how I usually plan them out is I try to book packages if the teacher offers it, and I try to sort of get something done with that teacher. So that is with a teacher at the moment, I'm trying to learn to give better reviews in Swedish. I say better, I've only ever done one and it was horrible, but to give reviews, like movie reviews and stuff, the way Swedish people would. So she sent me some reviews in Swedish to read, which I haven't read yet. That's what I mean by not always being able to do it the way I plan to. But yeah, I'm doing that in a package with her. So we've got quite a few lessons to cover it. That's kind of how I plan them out or conduct sessions. Luca has a way more structured approach to this. So if Luca's got a video on it, then I would probably recommend that, because I know that he has a thing of like listening back to the lesson 2 days afterwards and stuff. I'm not that planned out about it. I like to talk a lot, as you might have guessed. So I speak a lot. I just talk. I have a lot of lessons and I speak a lot with the teacher. There's something in Norwegian. Jag lärde mig norsk för ett par år sedan och kan förstå det. Går när du snackar svensk. Tack, Dustin. Det är bra. Okay, I should answer a question rather than just sitting here in silence. And for anyone who's just turned up in the last few minutes, thanks again for being here. This is on the iTalki theme. You mentioned you rewatch your iTalki lessons and take notes. Do you talk more about this process in another video? No, I don't. Do you take any notes during the class or just on the rewatch? Sometimes we have a Google Doc open together in the class, and we write it down there. Basically, I've changed my view on this. Since I've started going more heavily to the input side of things, I don't really worry about notes so much in the class, because like I was talking about before with the practice versus performance thing, the competence versus performance. To me, iTalki is a way of practicing your performance. So a way of practicing how you would speak the language. And when I speak the language face to face, I obviously don't take notes. I don't refer to notes. So I'm doing a lot more of that in iTalki, where I'm just like, okay, I've just had a bunch of input and now I'm going to practice outputting. I do like to watch my lessons back if I can muster the motivation to do it, but I often can't, because it's kind of cringy seeing yourself speak. Cringe-worthy, I should say. Don't like the word cringy. But I do like to, what I have done and what I've found more rewarding, I do have a video on this. I'll have to link to it in the description later, because I can't remember what it's called. But the thumbnail is like me sitting like this, and then there's a thing saying more rewarding, more useful or something. That's like, I edit all the times the teacher is talking into a single file. It only takes about 20 minutes to do. And then I've normally got about a 20-minute file of the teacher speaking in the lesson. And I've edited out all the times that I'm talking. And I just save that as an MP3 and I try to shadow that. Now, that's a good theory. The number of times I've actually done that would be about 5 or less. But it has been helpful when I've done it. And I've generally found that my iTalki performance, that is my ability to speak the next time, has been raised, especially my pronunciation. Speaking of which, Leia asks, what is the best source for shadowing practice? Is it better to start with informal spoken language or with timed predictable language as the Pimsleur method, for example? It's probably better to start with something a bit more formal and then move to something informal, but get a bit of both depending on your level. So if I can be bothered shadowing, which I often can't, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm often shadowing a YouTube video, so it's obviously quite informal. And that way I get to do all the ums and things, because even if you're aiming for like a really high level, even saying the way that an English speaker says it, or the way wherever you're from, like you'll hear like Italians and Spaniards will say like that. which is just not how we, in English, we tend to go or whereas Italians and Spaniards have that kind of e sound, right? Even that will sound unusual. So it's good to practice informal language as well, but it's hard and it's generally not written down and it's faster. So I also do it with formal language. Also, the only parent, if you've heard Matt and other people talk about getting a language parent, which is someone you're always trying to sound like as best you can, my only language parent at the moment is an audio narrator. So very formal, obviously. But that's the only person I can find that has like a lot of material in an accent that I would want. I'm going to get to some questions in the chat, might come back to other questions later. I think Jay Boops is trying to troll me when they say, how was language study in school growing up in New Zealand? Did not grow up in New Zealand. I have been to New Zealand though. Why exactly Swedish? I answered that just before. You might not have been here. There's some questions in Spanish. Sorry guys, not going to bother translating those. What level would you want your Swedish to get to before feeling confident enough to pick up French again? I'm sort of just going to play this by ear. I don't like, the levels are extremely specific at this point in that how do you, like, I'm still at B2, but I've been at B2 for a while now, so I'm definitely at higher B2 than I was before. I would like it to be the C level, but even that's kind of hard to distinguish exactly what a C level is. I don't think C2, if by the actual definition of C2 when you read it, I don't think that's really realistic without sort of dedicating my whole life to it, because the actual C2, a lot of people say I'm at C2 in this. You're probably not. I know that's really, really harsh, but you're probably not at C2 in a foreign language unless that's basically like all you do. Because a lot of people aren't at C2 even in their own language. And I know that's this is a whole controversial thing, but I'm aiming to get to AC level, so C1, obviously, and before I pick up French again. I would basically like my Swedish to be so good that I could easily learn a foreign language from Swedish. That is, I could easily have a Swede who speaks, say, Chinese fluently, sit there and teach me Chinese. Not that that's something I want to do. I'm just saying that that is the sort of level that I would want to get to. At the moment, if that happened, I could do that for quite a lot of things, but it would be still kind of hard to separate. Like Swedish still feels semi-foreign, like it doesn't feel totally foreign when I speak it. It still feels quite kind of natural in a way, but I still have that feeling like my brain still kind of goes like, this is not your main language. So I would like it to get to the point where they could be like, för att säga hej säger man ni hao. And I could be like, ja, för att säga hej, ni hao. And I could, if that made sense, like to say hello, you'd need to say ni hao, but I'd like Swedish to be like the fallback kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, these are the, oh, did someone ask about drops? Yes, drops. I'm going to review it soon. I've started writing my review. Thanks, Jackson Newton. I've got it now that I've got a phone. I only got this phone like not that long ago, and my old phone was not big enough. Like it didn't have enough storage on it, and you couldn't use the card storage to store any apps. So it could only have like 2 apps, and Drops wasn't one of them. I kind of like Drops. It's a bit dumb, but I do like it as well. Someone asked about translation, which is, yes, you asked about it in the, you already asked about it. So, sorry, I'm not going to try and say your name. It looks like a Spanish or Portuguese name. Do you think translation is really important for true comprehension of the language, or do you think that understanding through context, rarely translating, even if the translation you made is not 100% matched with what's given by the textbooks, is more beneficial? I think here's where I think it's a bit of a trade-off. Like, for example, you know, building a house out of brick or building it out of, I don't know, whatever else you can build houses out of, weatherboard. I don't know. There are pros and cons to both. So there are definite pros to translating. People who say like, oh, translation, it's stupid or whatever. No, there are definite pros to translating. Basically, if you're good at your native language, which most people are, then you've got like an amazing foundation to build a second language from. And so it's much quicker to learn the word for, say, parliament by someone just telling you that the word parliament is this in the second language, rather than trying to understand what that means through context. However, it is also imperfect. So I'm not going to try and think of a real example because I'll mess it up, but I'm listening to a lot of Swedish at the moment, and I'm noticing a few words that they use, like the way we would translate them might be like anyway or in any case or something, but they use them at times that we couldn't use anyway or in any case, or any of the things that we would say something entirely different. And they use the word förresten. I will give an example. Förresten, which will generally be translated as by the way, but they use it differently to the way we use by the way. So it is imperfect. So I think you should start with translation and then move to just a heavy input approach, which will give you the benefit of context with that. Because if you completely skip over translation, it's going to be very hard to learn words like agriculture or, parliamentary questions or ministerial affairs or anything like that. It's going to be quicker to learn those through translation, but then lots of input will teach you the difference between lots of things. And there's tense things as well. So Swedes will hear about something sad and they'll say, "Oh, men det var tråkigt." You say like, "Oh, I have a cold," and they'll say, "Men det var tråkigt," which actually means that was sad, even though it's an ongoing situation. So you've just got to learn it through context. So in a way, you have to do both, is basically my answer. You have to start with translation and then go up to context. Textbooks can only give they'll never give you all the uses of a word or anything. Okay. Are there any ways of Risco Gaming, are there any ways of improving accent in the target language? Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I'm getting distracted when I look at the chat box. There are definitely ways of improving accent in the language. Matt's got more nuanced thoughts on this than I do, but so shadowing was one. He's got this really complicated video on shadowing that is like a fair bit of money to set up in terms of you need a microphone and stuff. But where you can basically listen to yourself as someone else would hear it rather than through your own head, which sounds different. And then you can listen to another thing at the same time. I tried that. I didn't really kind of see the benefit, but so shadowing, so that is listening to something and then pausing it or trying to sound exactly like that. But basically just being more aware of sounds that that are different between what you're doing and what the native accent does. So firstly, choose one accent that you want to sound like. So whatever language you're learning, don't try and sound like everyone who speaks that language. That's what we mean when we say getting a parent. So a parent is like someone whom you're listening to all the time, the way a child listens to their parents all the time, and trying to sound like that. Now, there's certain rules about a parent. A parent should be roughly your age, like within 10 years either way, should be of your gender, because you're not going to sound like a female if you're a male generally, and the other way around. Should be Leia, yes, I am an INTP. Well picked. Should be basically someone you want to sound like, and there should be enough material from them that you can listen to them a lot without listening to the same things over and over again, so that you can hear the way they say all these kinds of different words. Now, it's harder to find than you think. Might be fairly easy in a language like Spanish or French. I've already found mine in French, actually, even though I'm not studying French anymore. I've got like the perfect parent. In Swedish, I've never quite found the perfect one. I thought I had one a couple of months ago, and then I was like, actually, no, that doesn't really work. Being more aware, your question was about accent, being more aware of sounds you make that are different from the native speakers, and you'll find that they just gradually kind of align themselves. It's kind of, as long as you're aware of the sound. So I know that I don't sound like a Swede. I can even hear it when I say certain words. I'm like, no, that wasn't right. And so Swedes are like, oh, you said this wrong. I'm like, yeah, I'm well aware of that. But as I've become more aware of it, it just gradually falls into line. Now, this is where a lot of people have a natural advantage, and some people just do not. Some people are very unaware of the sounds that they make. They say like, bonjour, je parle français très bien. And they actually think that that sounds like a French person. And I'm like, bonjour. Can you hear that, like jour, as opposed to like bonjour? It's totally different. And they're like, no, it's the same. So there are people who will have a very strong advantage in this if they can just hear the difference. But then you still have to do work, even if you're talented at it. Jim Morrison, what time is it? It is exactly 6:31 a.m. for me. David Graham says, sorry guys, I'm not going to get to all these, obviously, because there's like hundreds of them. But I'm just going to take them at random, basically. David Graham says, I managed to pronounce Polish very effectively by analyzing figures and where your tongue is placed. Yeah, see, I've never gotten into that, but I probably could. Even like different shaped mouths is going to be a thing. Like I've got a massive overbite and have even considered orthodontics, braces, before to try and correct that. And obviously that would change my accent massively, but also I have to worry about my dental health. Ibrahim, is it possible to sound like a native speaker? It is. Not many people manage to do it. Or is it just enough to speak clearly without an accent? Yeah, that's up to you. Like, I meet plenty of people who don't sound at all Australian, but I can understand them completely. But I do meet plenty of people who say certain words, and I'm like, I take it as another word. I'm like, what? Oh, right, you mean this. And that's me. And I'm aware of the fact that they're a foreign language speaker, and so they will be pronouncing things differently. I feel like a lot of Australians do have trouble understanding people with a strong accent when speaking English, because a lot of Australians are completely linguistically unaware. So it is enough to just get your message across. Sure, some people want to sound more native. I like sounding as native as possible. I don't yet sound native in Swedish. Actually, my French accent is naturally better than my Swedish accent, but it can be done in terms of sounding like a native when you're not. It's pretty rare, but I know for a fact that it can be done, because I know I know quite a few Swedes who moved here sounding like, that vaguely kind of European, and then they end up sounding like me when they speak. So it can be done, but it's rare. You don't have an accent. I hear natives tell me I have an American accent. Yeah, of course. When we say you don't have an accent, we mean you don't have a foreign accent. Sander, hey, I've got my English to a C2 level and got my Cambridge certificate for that, but was wondering if you have a similar goal for Swedish. Okay, so officially there is no C2 in Swedish, because the Swedish Academy, the Swedish Language Academy, or whatever they are, only measure up to a B2, because that's as high as is required to have any kind of, to do anything in the country. So like to be in certain university courses or whatever, I think. So officially there's no C2, but obviously there is. No, my goal isn't C2. I talked about that before. I don't think it's really possible with the amount of time I'm willing to spend. Romeo, asks, how long do you think it will take until you reach a C1 in Swedish? I'm not sure. I'm not doing as much as I'd like to lately, so maybe halfway through next year, but I don't like to put time barriers on things because I don't want to give myself the impression that if I get to halfway through next year, then like, sweet, I can go back to studying French or doing whatever I like. I want to be like, no, I'll get to C1 when I get to C1. Thanks, Emma. Is it okay to have more than one teacher? Yeah, I have lots of teachers for Swedish, but I don't try and sound like them all. That's one thing, that don't try and sound like all your teachers at once unless they all happen to sound the same. But in Swedish, that would never happen. How would you go about becoming more fluid in your everyday speech? What I mean is this phrases like NVM. What's NVM? I don't know what NVM, but I mean, you said sort of just those everyday things that people say. I guess watching more informal content and where they use phrases like that. So I did find that when I started getting more authentic Swedish content, like watching movies and YouTube videos and stuff, I started just filling in words with filling in what I was saying with like also like which is just kind of means so, but they say it in a way that kind of just means what I mean to say is, or they just use it as a filler word. Elsa P, how intelligible do you find watching Norwegian when you tried to watching a Norwegian show? Mostly not very intelligible in a show, but that's because an adult show often lacks a lot of, you can't kind of guess what they're going to say that well. When I speak to Norwegians face to face, I have very little trouble understanding them. In fact, I've met Norwegians with whom it was easier for us to speak Swedish and Norwegian than it was for us to speak English, because she had lived in Norway since she was 13 and she was only like 20. So she had spent basically that entire time learning Norwegian, not learning English. So her English wasn't very good compared to most Norwegians. Never mind. Right. NVM. Yeah, sorry. My internet slang's not that good. NVM means never mind. Yeah, like that. There's so many of those little words that no one person uses them all. Like there's some phrase that I realized recently that I never use. And you shouldn't try and use them all. You just kind of develop your own vocabulary of what you use. But whatever you hear a lot, you're going to start using, as long as you understand how it's used. How do you push past the intermediate stage? It's difficult to understand natural language in a different language, despite understanding a lot of other stuff. Not sure I quite understand what you mean. Oh, understanding. Yeah, well, you've just got to listen to natural sounding stuff and accept that you're not going to understand it. That's where movies and things come in handy. Give everyone here who's going, I don't know how to do this, give yourself 20 minutes of watching a series in your target language without the subtitles, or at least with the target language subtitles. But I would say at first, no subtitles at all. And just see the way that you actually get quite used to that feeling of not understanding things. That's a massive advantage. Like, I would say my Swedish has doubled, my Swedish ability has doubled since understanding that that's just what you've got to do. You've just got to do it. Can reading improve my speaking? I'm reading better now, but I'm just getting better at guessing. You're probably learning some vocabulary, but Half Blind asks, can reading improve my speaking? I'm reading better now, but maybe I'm just getting better at guessing. Yes, you do get better at reading through just ignoring what you don't need to know and stuff. But so you should be trying to learn vocabulary in some kind of way, even if it's just underlining it. And if you're reading a lot, just underlining it will help, because you'll start to see those same words again and again. But yes, reading can help your speaking. Like that, it's just not a very strong correlation. So you have to read a lot before it will help your speaking. So if your goal is to improve your speaking, then you should listen a lot and try and output some percentage of how much you listen, less than 100%, that is. You should try and output less than you listen. But reading does help. Like, you can tell the difference between someone who's university educated. Well, you can tell the difference between somebody who went to high school in English and somebody who didn't, generally because of how much they've read and are able to use phrases in that are more found in written language. So there is a difference. Jackson, if you get a Bosu certificate saying that you are level B2, do you think that is? If you've only done Bosu, even if you've done it all really well and gotten 100%, then yes, I think it's inflated, definitely. But if you're doing, I would never be just doing Bosu. When I did my review of Bosu, I was kind of assuming that you would be doing other stuff alongside. If you've done a lot of other input alongside, then I do think you could actually say that you are B2. So my French understanding is almost at B2, but that's, let's face it, that's a cheat from a lot of the English. But certainly my spoken ability isn't at B2. IDK equals I don't know. I did know that one. Did I? Okay. I did know that one. Have you ever listened to any Swedish podcasts? I'm not heaps into podcasts. I have listened to Swedish podcasts. Yes, there are so many though. Like, it's almost like there's so many that I just don't even bother. I'm really enjoying my Swedish book at the moment, that I'm audio and reading the book. So I'm really, really enjoying it. Like, I think I'm probably going to finish it today or tomorrow. Does Swedish contain Anglicisms? Definitely. Do you mean like stolen English words, or do you mean things in common? It contains both. It contains things in common with like English that's been around for many centuries, and it contains English loan words and French loan words that are stolen over the last couple of hundred years or so, and it contains like totally new English that's just taken from like today and the language of the internet and stuff. The thing is that it sounds more, people therefore think it's going to be like, oh, well, like they're speaking sort of half English, but they conjugate it in a Swedish way. So they'll often say like, this might be called like live streamen, which is like the live stream, or could it be streamet? I don't know the gender of it, but they'll like conjugate it in a Swedish way. So they'll say like, this will be to att streama, to stream, but you've got to put att streama, otherwise it doesn't sound Swedish at all. So yeah, it contains a lot of Anglicisms, but of different qualities, and some of them they spell differently and some of them they spell the same. And then if they spell them the same as the English one, then that's an exception to how they generally spell things. And then there's ones that they disagree how to spell on, like att make ingen sense, att make ingen sense, which is to make no sense, or det make ingen sense, that makes no sense. Some of them will change it to a Swedish spelling, which will be like MEJKAR, att maker, but others of them will just spell it the English way. So I did not use Pimsleur to learn Swedish, no. Yeah, there are books behind me. Most of them I have not actually used. Pimsleur, the Pimsleur behind me on that side is Japanese, and on that side is French. I just bought them because they were on like massive clearance, and they to look nice on my shelf. I might review them one day, but yeah. Jag gillar att chilla. Jag gillar att chilla. So yeah, someone's written in the comments, I like to chill, and that's obviously att chilla. That is the Swedish version of to chill. But then who knows what it's the English version of. So I was listening to a linguist recently. Is she a linguist? Yeah, professor of linguistics at Monash University, Kate Burridge, was saying that languages tend to change quickly when they're under the influence of another language. So Swedish is very much under the influence of English at the moment, so it's changing very quickly. That is not to say it's changing so fast that you can't learn it. Like, no language changes that quickly, but whereas when languages are sort of isolated for a long time, they tend to change much more slowly. So Icelandic has not changed greatly in the last 100 years. They have actually they implemented that in a way. The Icelanders, they were like, it's going to be like this, and we're keeping it like this. And new words that showed up from English, they would invent an Icelandic word for. But yeah, so Swedish is very much under the influence of English lately, and therefore changing quickly. English is under the influence of itself in a way. So where our language is changing very quickly because of the internet and things like that. So the word, like, you'll hear people say like, so cringe, and I mentioned that before. There was an adjective for something that made you cringe, which was cringe-worthy. But how, like, you never hear the word cringe-worthy anymore. I still prefer it because it just makes more sense to say than something is cringe. But and sorry about my hair, by the way. I couldn't get it to stay flat when I woke up. So my first language is German, and I am currently practicing for Cambridge Certificate in Advanced English, which tries to achieve a C1 level. However, I lack in writing skills. Do you have any tips? Read a lot, write a lot. So read a lot, then write. Read a lot in English, and then like, read good English. So don't read internet English, obviously. And then write and have a teacher correct it. So there are lots of cheap teachers on iTalki. Try and find one who's been to Luca Lampariello. Hey, man, he's the star. You see, I was actually at an Italian-English bilingual school for work yesterday, which was interesting. And actually, there was a kid in, I think, every grade called Luca. Yeah, so read a lot, write a lot would be and have a good teacher correct it. And by good, I mean, hopefully they've got some kind of evidence that they are a good writer, because good writer as in they know how to write correctly. I have noticed that a lot of people who speak perfectly good English don't necessarily write good English. So it's good if they've done, say, a university degree in which they had to write essays and things, or if they did a high level of English in high school or something like that. But it's kind of hard to, yeah, it's kind of hard to gauge this. How many, now I can't tell if people are asking Luca questions. How many languages do you know random words in? Oh, 15 maybe? No, probably not that many. 10? Who is Luca? I hope Jackson Newton is trolling. Luca speaks 14 languages to a similar level to my Swedish, or higher. In fact, definitely higher, with about 5 or 6 of them. Can I do a weekly live stream? Ibrahim, probably not. I'm glad that it's useful, but it's at a weird time for me or everyone else. So I'm doing this at 6 a.m. my time. The reason I'm doing that, by the way, is I had to be up early on Friday for work. I have to be up early on Monday again for work. So I thought I might as well keep the habit of staying up early and matching that with the 30,000 subs thing. Add any plans to add Glossika to your list of language products to review? It's sort of been on my list for a while. It's weird because there are so many language products. I just sometimes get a feeling like I want to review certain ones, and it's not necessarily based on like how big they are or how popular they are or anything. I just sometimes get a feeling like I want to do a review, like with Verbling, not Verbling, Drops on my phone. Verbling contacted me, so that's why I reviewed them. But with drops, I just sort of wanted to have a look at it, and then I was like, I think I could do a really entertaining review about this. So yeah, it's kind of Glossika, maybe. I don't think there's heaps of reviews out there about Glossika, but people asking me to review Pimsleur, it's like, well, Pimsleur's been around so long, I kind of feel like you should be able to find some stuff on it already. Greetings from Ukraine. Yeah, that's the. Sorry, I keep cutting myself off halfway through. That's kind of how maybe Glossika. The thing is, Glossika, I would have to reach out to they would have to at the very least give me a free trial, because it's pretty expensive, Glossika. Actually, I'll just give you a very quick review. I did their free Swedish lesson or something, and it was only 10 questions, and I noticed a mistake in like the first quiz. So I was like, that's not good. And it definitely was a mistake. I checked it with like 4 Swedish speakers, and they're all like, yeah, that's definitely not right. Vlad from the Ukraine, I found out recently, Vlad, that I'm either a quarter or an eighth, depending on how you count, Ukrainian. So there you go. Yes, Glossika does offer minority languages like Welsh and a couple of Gaelic, Scots Gaelic at least. I'm not sure if Irish Gaelic, they offer that for free. There's a couple they offer that. Faroese, maybe? Yeah, it's pretty good, the free ones. But then when you compare with the price of their normal ones, it's like, well, how are you giving some of them away for free and other ones are $30 a month, I think? It's like really expensive. Do you think there'll ever be a point where you're done with Swedish? Well, I talked about that a bit before. I don't think there'll ever be a point where I can't learn any more Swedish, obviously. There's no point. I haven't gotten to that point in English. But there'll be a point where I'm happy with it to keep going to another language. I talked about translation before, Darby, so you might have to just go back a bit later. Do you plan to learn about the Swedish pitch accent? I feel like when I watch things that I intuitively have a feel for, so like when I watch people explaining certain things about pitch accent and stuff, that I'm like, yeah, like I had already picked that up. It just kind of bores me. But I know that's bad. Like, you've got to do things that bore you occasionally. But when I tried to watch stuff on like where the way they say things come from, and I'm like, yeah, the way they say things comes from, and I was like, yeah, I know. Well, it's not that I know, I just don't really care where it comes from, as opposed to just how it sounds. Is it normal to get tongue-tied when speaking a foreign language? Yeah, absolutely. I get tongue-tied when I speak English sometimes. And actually, sometimes, no, I'll talk about this more in depth, because that's a good question. Sometimes your competence, so how well you understand the language, I talked about this before, can quite quickly accelerate. So you'll suddenly feel like, oh, I can say all this stuff, and you will actually be able to say it, except that your mouth is not ready. So, and those connections have not been formed between your brain and your mouth. So you'll be like, oh, and you know exactly what you want to say, and you'll be sort of rushing to say it, and your tongue will go, hang on, right? So it can actually be a good sign that your competence has increased quite quickly when you say things, when you suddenly go, oh, I thought I knew how to say that, but then my mouth stuffed it up. Just like in English, if I were to say, like, each insect thing that comes in spring to glad in this sad earth, it flits and whirls and pipes and skulls and chirps in mocking mirth, a merry song the whole day long. To see, I just did it, and that wasn't deliberate. I just actually stuffed up this verse that I know really well, because my competence of it is so high that my mouth can't keep up with my brain at that point. So it is normal to get tongue-tied, and it can even be a good sign. But if you just go stopping and going, like you don't know what to say next, then that's probably a sign that your competence is low and you need more input. Okay. Hummingbird makes, are you planning on visiting Sweden sometime? So, I don't know why I stuffed up reading that. Ja, det är jag. Men först måste du titta på min video som kallas för I studied a language for 57 hours in 1 week. Det förklarar hela grejen. Så ja, jag planerar att besöka Sverige någon gång, men det är, jag vet inte när det kan hända. Hummingbird makes, I'm pretty sure I had it correct that you are Swedish, so I hope I just answered that question for you. Yes, I'm planning on visiting Sweden, but it's not really possible with my family and financial situation and everything right now. So everyone who hasn't, after this is over, if you want to keep watching this, go and watch my video called I Studied a Language for 57 Hours in 1 Week. It is my best video easily, yeah, that explains the whole going to Sweden situation towards the end. Are you of Swedish ancestry? No, I'm not. Have you done any other languages before? I'm interested in how they compare. European languages seem fun. I studied German at school. And Hummingbird makes, sorry for the bad Swedish then. I'm obviously like, it's first thing in the morning, and I've also just been speaking a whole lot of English. So that's not normally the level of my Swedish once I've kind of warmed up a bit. Luca says, I'm curious to know what your take is about what is possible to achieve in 6 months when it comes to achieving verbal fluency. It's weird answering this knowing it's you asking. Well, I think you can achieve quite a lot in 6 months, but I think it can harm your overall progress if you try to achieve verbal fluency in 6 months. So that's what I did in both Swedish and French. I tried to achieve fluency as fast as possible, because when you don't really know anything, you're like, oh, fluency, that's the goal. So I kind of followed a Benny Lewis approach of just speaking a lot. And I became quite fluent in what I already knew, but obviously in an extremely limited range of expressions and vocabulary. However, if you take something like the Michel Thomas method, where he sort of skips over a lot of stuff that's more difficult and just focuses on the things that are similar, so he'll kind of explain it in a way and have a mnemonic to remember stuff. So he'll be like, in French, you don't wait for people, you await them. So je vous attends, and he'll sort of build up a whole thing like that. You can feel like you're quite fluent quite quickly, and if you did a similar approach for 6 months, you probably would be quite fluent. But I think overall it would harm your competence of the language in the long run. I don't think that's to say that you could never fully acquire the language. I just think it wouldn't be the quickest way necessarily. But also, speaking, obviously you know this better than anyone. If it's very different if you're a Spanish native speaker and you're learning Portuguese, I'm assuming you can become quite fluent quite quickly. You learn a couple of new words, a couple of new grammar structures, and a bit of pronunciation, you can probably become quite fluent. But then there's appearing fluent and actually being highly competent. So when I speak Swedish, I don't appear particularly fluent, but then I can comfortably read novels in Swedish. So who's more fluent? The person who's learned a script or the person who can read novels? You'd say like the person who's learned a script certainly appears more fluent, but the person who can read novels is definitely more competent. That's my basic take on it. And that's where I have an issue with things like Nathaniel Drew's I Learned Italian in 7 Days video, in that like he's only fluent in what he can say in that video. He's not actually competent in the language. And furthermore, he's been studying it for 18 months at that point, not 7 days. So that's basically my take on that. Do you have an inner dialogue or just abstract thoughts? Is that in English, or how do you think this impacts your learning? I've been thinking about this a lot, Adam, which is probably the opposite to what I want to do. I've been trying to somewhat switch off my inner dialogue. I have been noticing more often when I think in what's called mentalese, or what some people sometimes call mentalese, when I am just thinking in sort of pictures, like going, yeah, I need to go up there, but that won't occur in English. That'll just be like me going, me there. And I think the more often you can do this, the more positively it affects your language, because you learn to associate thoughts with the way you express them rather than English with the way I express it, if that makes sense. But when I speak Swedish, I certainly don't think in English, if that's what you mean. But obviously meditation is one of the goals, is to help switch off the inner dialogue, and I'm starting to do that more and more often. There are so many people here now. Thank you all for watching. That number just keeps going up. So thanks all for coming. How do you learn massive amounts of vocabulary? I've answered a few of your questions. I'll answer this one. You do a map versus Japan. You get tons of input every day, and you put interesting things from the input into things you don't know into Anki, and you do enough Anki to do 10 new words a day. He learned 10 new words a day for like 5 years, which 10 new words a day doesn't sound like much, but that's 3,650 words a year, or I'm guessing he means like characters, and characters combined to make words. So 3,650 words a year for 5 years is like 18,000 words, or close to it. So that is a lot of vocabulary. So yeah, combine input with a spaced repetition system. Doesn't have to be Anki. Anki's probably the best if you set it up well. My recommendation is not to use vanilla Anki. So vanilla Anki is the nickname for like just the straight Anki when you download it. It looks terrible. I can't use it. So I've like put a different color on it. I've made the font way larger, and like I have different fonts for if it's Swedish or English, or I generally don't use a lot of English, but I have like a definition in italics, and what do I think about Asimov? I've never used it, but Luca uses it, so it must work in some way. But I've never used it. If I ever get really good at French, I'll probably use Asimov just so I can use it from all that, because they have like every language into, let's say they have from French into every language. So that's what I think about. I'm just worried about the mic hitting the thing. I'm assuming the mic issue has stopped, because a lot of people have turned up recently and not said anything about the mic. Jason, hey Jason. Are you using subs to SRS? I'm just about to try to start using it. I think that even if I'm pretty slack with like getting things set up. Like when I just feel like I'm gonna have to do half an hour's work to like even make something happen for me, or even an hour. So half an hour or even more than that, I'm like, ugh. So I want to start using subs to SRS, because recently I've been watching all my shows with Swedish subtitles, even if the show isn't in Swedish. So just because I want to watch certain shows, like I watched Die Dag, The Day, it's a Flemish show, Dutch, Belgian. Awesome show. I thoroughly recommend it. And I watched it with Swedish subtitles, and I found some useful vocabulary in there. So it's like, that would be really useful to have subs to SRS for, but I haven't set it up yet because I don't like that initial act. I always go, I'm going to do this, and then I go, no, I'm actually just going to go read my book in Swedish. So at least my default has been to do something in Swedish, but I still don't. I have resistance to setting things up. Quizlet is better than Anki. Well, I think that's debatable. Quizlet is not completely customizable, I don't think. Martin J, sort of depends where you're up to. When you're up to like my stage in Swedish, so like a definite B2, I'm just a proponent of getting a lot of input and then practicing that every now and then. So it doesn't really matter how you get the input. Sorry, need to read out the question. Are you a proponent of using as many techniques as possible to learn a language, or should one stick to one to avoid confusion? Or one or two to avoid confusion. At first, I think you should stick to maybe 2 or 3. Certainly not getting everything, because you never learn anything well then. But sort of maybe up to about B1, and then you can just start. And then you just start getting input from various sources. Okay. Yeah, sorry about the mic, guys. I think I need a new lapel mic. More people asking about Asimul. I've not tried Asimul. That is the very short answer to that. Any tips on how to set a goal of study hours and how to organize my week with that goal in mind? My tip is to, so let's say you set a goal of study hours of 15 hours in the week. That's going to be 2 and a little bit hours a day. My tip is to get as much of that possibly done in the morning as you can. Much of that done in the morning as you possibly can. Because I just find that it doesn't happen later in the day. I know people are like, well, I learn better later in the day and stuff. Okay, but also just the longer you go through your day without stuff happening, that without language learning happening, the longer that you will, the more chance that it is that it won't happen, basically. When it happens first thing of the day, nothing can disorganize it, basically. Nothing can rearrange your plans. It's very unlikely anyway. So that's basically how I do it. And also just be realistic about your week. So I know that I'm working more than usual next week. So I'm going to have to put in place where I'm going to do my Swedish. In the last couple of months, for obvious reasons, I've not had to do that. I just do it, and I've got lots of time. But with like video editing and whatever that I've got next week, and just being realistic about that, just going, okay, I've got work here, I've got work here. You'll find that in planning time, you can still set up a lot of time that you can practice the language or get language hours in. But and planning, even if you don't stick to that exactly, just helps you to do it more in a more likely way than you would. You know what I'm trying to say. Because you can see that actually I have like 3.5 hours free a day, and you'll find you don't know where that goes if you don't plan for it. Whereas if you plan for it, you'll be like, oh, I can see that that's when it's supposed to happen. You mentioned you wanted to teach Swedish to your children at some point. Is there a specific method you want to use with them? My older son, sorry, I've got 2 sons now. So they're 9 and almost 3 months. My older son wanted to learn it for a little while. And what I was doing, I was reading some Swedish kids books with him. They're for like 9 to 12-year-olds, and they're really well-written books. They're really quite exciting for someone of that age. So he was quite into that. I was reading and I was helping him translate, and he was noticing, as kids tend to do, he was noticing like repetitions of words and stuff. So he did actually learn. Even now, he says, like, I say some things, I'll say something and he'll be like, did you just say this? I'll be like, yes, I did. So this was a couple of months ago, but he was never really interested to keep going with it. But every now and then he gets a spurt of motivation and he does what he wants to do more with me. With my younger son, who's 3 months old, so I speak Swedish to him almost all the time, even when my other son and my wife are around. And my plan with him is for him to have most of his media in Swedish. So, in like when when going through the toddler stage and having their like hour of TV a day or whatever, my plan is for that to be Swedish. There's lots of Swedish kids media available, so that shouldn't be difficult. My plan is to basically bring him up in Swedish with me and in English with his mum and his brother and everything. Now, obviously, living in Australia, he's going to get a lot more English than he is Swedish, which is why I'm quite regimented about it. I'm like, no, when I speak to him, it has to be in Swedish. Now, I know my Swedish is not perfect, so his can't be perfect, but he's going to be getting media and everything at a very influential age. So it'll probably end up being more natural than mine in a lot of ways. But obviously my vocab and everything in more advanced topics is going to be higher than his. But we're just going to see what happens. We're not going to be like, no, he has to do Swedish. There's also actually a Swedish after school care. So an after school care is like a school that kids go to after school where they just play and stuff to if their parents can't pick them up from school in time. There's a Swedish after school care around here, and that was one of the reasons that I went back to Swedish rather than choosing to focus on French, because the nearest French school around here is a full school, not an after school care. So that would have been good, but it's like about an hour away. So we can't really do that in terms of getting into that school. Whereas there's the Swedish after school care is like 10 minutes away. So we'll see how that goes. Yes, SVT does have great kids. Sure. Yep, I'm on all over SVT, Anna. Thanks. Greet Astrid. You'll have to go back to earlier in the live stream. I did answer. How did maybe about 5 to 10 minutes in? I'm not sure. How do you go about studying grammar for Swedish and French in the beginning? Are you still trying to study more advanced grammar out of context? Was I ever trying to study more advanced grammar out of context? Ross W, I'll get to your comment in a question. I'll get to your comment in a second. Sorry guys, I had plenty of sleep, but I was really tired yesterday, so I'm still waking up a little bit. I don't think if I've ever said that I was studying grammar out of context, I didn't mean to say that. If you're talking about the Swedish grammar book behind me, it's a reference book, so it is to refer to every now and then. It's really interesting, that book, for me, because I'm a student of Swedish. When I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I've never noticed they do that. And like, so because it's explained from an English speaker's point of view, it's a really good book. It's got everything in that book. But I was never really trying to learn complex grammar out of context. With Swedish and French, with Swedish, the grammar is so similar that there's only a couple of times when you could ever really require any kind of explanation, and even then it's quite rare. And in French, the vocab is so similar that the grammar is almost self-explanatory, because the vocab is like, it's all there. So if you can't figure out what it's saying, you just need a very quick explanation, and you're like, oh, okay, so they have to say 2 things for the negative or whatever. And then there's just lots of input. I'm going to say this lots during the live stream. It's not about studying the language. It's about hearing and listening. Hearing and listening. I'm stuffing all these things up. It's about listening to the language and reading the language and seeing the language a lot, the same way you did with your native language. The reason that most people can never, ever become like truly, like really, really fluent in a second language is that they undervalue how much time they need to spend in that language. So it's like there's basically nothing I could do with my life that would ever see me having spent more time in Swedish than I have in English already. Like, I was like a very keen English student at school, so I was always reading. Like, the amount of English input I've had would be like 7 to 8 hours a day more for my entire life. So that's why I speak English really well, if you don't mind me saying so myself. There's no way that I'm ever going to get that in Swedish, but obviously I can get a lot, and that's what makes a difference. So I don't plan on studying grammar out of context, but it is sometimes interesting to read like little things that you're like, oh, I didn't know they said that. For Ross W, I think it was, who asked about Swedish after school care in Australia. Yes. So there's a bit of a hidden Swedish community here in Australia in the various capital cities. Not that I live in a capital city, but yeah, I live in the 10th largest city, so it's still there's communities of Swedes who like to hang out together and do stuff together and start things after school cares together and cafes, and so yeah, if you can find them, they are out there, and they love it here because it's warm and they like warm weather. Alex Trotman, yes, of course you can ask questions. Thanks, Ventrix. Okay. Yeah, see, Anna, I think you would agree that most Swedes are fluent in English because they get to hear a lot of English. And yeah, like some of it is about how similar the languages are, but I think Steve Kaufman has pointed out that Croatians are actually normally, is it Croatians? I think it's Croatians or Czech, I'm not sure. I get those two Slavic countries confused, but whichever one he was learning, I think it's Croatian, they are quite fluent in English too, and their language is not at all similar to English. So it's not just about that. It's mainly about how much input they get, and Swedes get a lot of input. But then, but then there's a few things, and I hope Swedes won't mind me saying this. There's a few things that Swedes are like, they are fluent in English, but at the same time, they're not like native speakers. So they'll say things like every now and then that you're like, yeah, okay, I get what you mean, but it's not actually quite how we would say it. But, and that's totally fine. Yeah, and you have to speak English too. Croats, thanks, Christopher. Same with Finns. Yeah, but see, I don't think Finns are quite as fluent in English, at least not in my experience. Now, Finnish is very different to English, but they also start learning it about 2 years later at school, and I think their society is just a little bit more Finnish heavy than Sweden is Swedish heavy. So like Sweden might have like 70% of stuff is in Swedish and 30% of stuff is in English. Whereas I think in Finland, it's more like 80% is in Finnish and 20% is in English or less. So they're not quite as fluent in my experience. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. I love the Finnish people. I love their language too. But yeah, they're not quite as fluent. It's weird. Officially, last I checked, Sweden was the highest scoring country with English as a second language. But that is based on people who need to take the test, and therefore it's quite skewed data, because I think if you would find that, and yeah, I know people love the way I say data. That's how we pronounce it in Australia, data. I think that is quite skewed by the fact that a lot of people from the Netherlands probably don't take that test or don't have to or something. I don't know exactly how it works, but I don't think that Sweden is the best English as a second language country. I think that it's probably the Netherlands. Even Iceland is also crazy good. Norway would have to be amazing. You would think, like, I think it'd be very close, obviously, but I don't think Sweden is the best because they've got actually the biggest speaking population of those countries I just named. I think it's bigger than the Netherlands. I'm not sure. Whereas Iceland is like tiny, so it's no good at all if you go anywhere other than Iceland, just speaking Icelandic. So they all speak English to almost like a ridiculous level. Sometimes it's genuinely better than their Icelandic. And Icelandic's a hard language too. So it's kind of a weird thing. Yeah, Melodifestivalen. I did see it before. I just haven't. I'd like to elaborate on my answers a bit more. Nej, det har jag inte sett. I don't know. I'm not really into that stuff. I'm not into it in English, so I wouldn't really watch it in Swedish either. I know that Clara Henry, whom I like when she's on YouTube, and I did Anis Dondamina. I don't. I know that he that they are like judges on it or something. So I think it probably would be entertaining. But I don't have time for everything. I just watch what I have time for. Yeah, the Dutch speak really good English generally. I actually want to do a video with another Dutch YouTuber soon who speaks English in her videos, but okay, so it's officially the Netherlands now, but it varies greatly on like basically who does the test every year. Oh, you're in the Netherlands now. Can you go over your history and how you got introduced into languages and how young you started? The answer to that is not young at all. I was 30, unless you count German at school, but I don't. Hey, Tony. Tack. Yeah, so that's, I went into why I started learning Swedish before, but, oh, Netherlands, 17 million. Okay, sorry. So it is higher than Sweden. I just generally I do find a lot of Swedes whose English, I say a lot, a comparatively high number, whose English is still kind of like a bit shaky or a bit weird. Whereas I don't, obviously I don't meet as many Dutch people, but when I meet Dutch people, sometimes I have trouble telling that they're even Dutch, like their English is that good. This is the YouTuber that I want to do a video with. I won't name her just in case it doesn't happen. But her English is so good that when I was first watching her video, I was like, where is this person from? Like, her English is not quite native, but damn, it's good. And then, yeah. Okay, I think I'm probably gonna wind this up soon. How much, Alex Trotman, how much study a week would you recommend for a teenager who has other responsibilities in life? Well, I definitely have other responsibilities in life. I would recommend that you first get it to a stage where you can get your input quite naturally. So where you can read, listen, and watch movies, and that is somewhat of a comfortable experience. That is, you don't need to, it's not like really, really hard work. And then you should be able to find that you get about 2 to 3 hours a day. So that would be like 20 hours a week. Belgians are also pretty good at English. That is the Dutch speaking part. Yes, the French speaking part are not so good at English. The Dutch speaking part of Belgium is also very good at making series. And the French speaking part, again, not great. But the French speaking part of Belgium is very good at making music. The best way to start back in is just to learn a couple of words again, prog mic, and then start maybe watching French material with subtitles in your native language, and then turn the subtitles off. Ventrix, how have you kept the motivation to learn Swedish in particular for so long? From what I understand, you started learning it as a joke, and it's no secret that it's not the most useful language. Yeah, so I kept the motivation. I didn't keep the motivation to learn it. I lost it and then picked it back up, and then lost it and picked it back up. I am very good at doing things for doing things very intensely for a very short period of time, and then like letting them go and not ever getting them to a useful level. So what I did with Swedish is, when I started to notice my motivation waning, well, first I just went, stuff it, I'm learning French. And that's why I started learning French so early when I shouldn't have, because I just basically got bored with Swedish. And I sort of did Swedish and French back and forth a little bit. And then it was recently when I was like, no, in order to stop myself being this person who always learns everything to like a small level and then dropping it, I need to focus on one thing. So at the moment, my focus on Swedish is actually less about Swedish and more about myself and getting myself to do things that that are not necessarily exactly what I want to do, but like finding ways to encourage myself to do that. So it's helped with Swedish that I've now gotten to the point that I can read novels and stuff. So I'm just enjoying the material that I'm taking in and learning it. Maybe not the most efficient way through that, but at least I am learning it. That's basically how I've done it, is that I've made it more about my own kind of challenge. Also, this channel has helped with my motivation to an extent. YouTube channels definitely don't help for the amount of time that you want to spend in the language, but they do help for motivation. So there's a reason that I called it Days of French and Swedish, and that's that I wanted to focus on French and Swedish for an extended period of time. One day I might be studying another language. I don't care. The channel will still be called Days of French and Swedish because I started the channel in the days that I was studying French and Swedish, hence the name. So yeah, just like finding what your own kind of, finding your own pitfalls. That is to say, I tend to give things up when I get okay at them, and acknowledging that and saying, okay, that's not great. Let's actually do something for real. Now that might sound like it makes it boring and a task and everything, but that actually helped me to say, okay, so learning Swedish now is more about just me trying to not be the person that I've always been, which has never been particularly useful, because like I got okay at guitar and then I stopped that. I got okay at piano and then I stopped that. And then I did music at university and I learned quite a lot at that, but like I never actually did that as a career because it was boring to me at the time. I still love music, but and then I did photography for a couple of years, and I got very good at that for a short period, like for how long I'd been studying it, which was not very long, how long I'd been doing it. I got very good at photography, but again, and then it got boring to me, and that's just how things tend to happen for me. So Swedish is my way of facing that demon, basically. That might be an extreme way to put it, but that's basically right. When I refer to not using subtitles, I mean English subtitles or native language subtitles, yes. Even, I find if you want to practice your comprehension, you should also turn off target language subtitles, because it's very easy. It's much easier to read target language subtitles than it is to listen to target language material. Also, most subtitles don't say exactly what they say, or not even close, because the speed at which they talk cannot be. There are rules about subtitles and how long they can be and how quick they can appear and everything. How fast, how short on the screen can they be there for? Short? How little time is what I mean. There are rules, and proper subtitlers will stick to those rules, and so they don't say anywhere near what they actually say. So if you want to comprehend, like if someone says like, if in the movie they say like, yeah, I don't know, man, he was just here yesterday, why do you want to know? If they say that quickly, the subtitles will not say that. The subtitles will say, I don't know why, basically, because that's as little time, that's as many words as they're allowed to put on the screen for that time in which you said. Like I've noticed that I was watching a French series with Swedish subtitles, and I noticed that that wasn't to improve my French, by the way. That was because I wanted to watch the series and I wanted to use the Swedish subtitles. And I noticed that sometimes they would say like all this stuff, like they would say like, no thank you, by the way, did you ever call that guy who I told you about in Syria? And the subtitles would just say, no, did you call him? Like, but what if it's Danish? Well, dude, Danes can understand Danish, like, well, sort of. What if it's Danish? Like, use subtitles for a little while, but then you're going to have to turn them off. If you're going to learn to understand Danish, you will have to learn to turn off the subtitles. Yeah, what type of French series? I was watching, I think in French it's called Le Bureau des Légendes. It's a really well-known, high-rated show. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with it because it's really long, but and I'm finding it a little bit confusing having a language that I half understand and then having Swedish subtitles. But because it's free on SVT, I was watching it. It's called Falsk identitet in Swedish, which means false identity. So it's totally different title. That's what I was watching. But I'm finding it a little bit confusing watching with French, with Swedish subtitles. Whereas when I was watching a Dutch series with Swedish subtitles, that was fine. Korean subs often show exactly what is said in the movies. Wow. I mean, that might be a different thing in Korea, because I read a book about translation from a professional French-English translator who actually goes into the rules of subtitles, which is how I know that those rules exist. Yeah, watch with subtitles and then watch the same episode and put subtitles. I think you mean without. Watch without subtitles. I would do it the other way around, actually, Matthias. I would watch it with. Sorry, I don't know how to say your name. I would do it with subtitles first, get the understanding first, and then go to no subtitles or target language subtitles, or maybe even if you can cope with it 3 times, if it's really complicated, like if it's a complicated movie, then watch it with your language subtitles, target language subtitles, and then no subtitles. You could do that. Noah W, I think about Danish. So Greet Astrid asks, what do you mean about Danish? I think they are referring to the fact that Danish is notoriously difficult to understand because they don't have a heap of consonants. So I have actually read a study about this. The study suggested that even Danish children are actually some of the slowest in comprehending their own language, because generally children rely more on consonants than they do on vowels. So the word like dad, for example, is one of the first words that kids learn, and it's a very similar word in lots of languages. And mum, and it's very clear that like dad is d, or papa, and mum is. So it's about the consonants, right? Whereas Danish is very, they leave out a lot of words in full sentences. Yeah, well, okay, well, that maybe as well, but yeah, they leave out a lot of sounds, or they don't pronounce their consonants the proper dansk, the proper Danish pronunciation is often without the consonants. So yeah, like that's why I can read Danish, but I can't really understand it, because they might say a word that I actually know completely, but they don't say it in a way that's recognizable to me. And even for Danes, that's people being, okay, I don't want to get into meanness about Scandinavia. Is that an Italian book behind you? Someone asked. I do have one. Yeah, there, sorry, on that side. Yeah, it's not a book, it's the Michelle Thomas Method CD packs. Again, I just got them because they were on crazy clearance. And I was like, one day I might use it. I assume you like blue a lot. You know what? I used to just put whatever books I thought looked good on my shelf, which I still kind of do. But I noticed that when I wore blue, the color of my eyes popped a little bit more. Like I've got blue eyes, and with the light, the way I have it and stuff, it tends to make my eyes look blue and therefore look better. And let's face it, like I'm not trying to look like a supermodel when I do my videos, but everyone will watch a video with more interest if the person presenting at least looks okay. Like if the whole scene doesn't just look really ugly. And my blue eyes are the best thing I've got going for me. So I noticed that a few people were like, "Oh, your eyes look really good," or "I love your blue eyes," or something. I noticed when I wore blue that was more striking. So I did start actually putting more blue in my shots. Yeah, so that's a real thing. So thanks for noticing. Talvisulu, I've answered that earlier in the stream. Why pay for iTalki when so many free online chat out there? Well, it depends on the language. You could probably do that quite easily with a lot of languages. But with Swedish, there's not heaps of Swedes who will be willing to speak to you in Swedish for free just because, unless your Swedish is really good, and then you were giving them a hand in something. Yeah, so it depends on you. It depends on lots of factors. But that's why I don't actually pay for iTalki lessons any longer. You guys pay for them by using my links in the description, and since about March, I've been getting maybe one free lesson every 2 days, or one $10 thing every 2 days, which is enough to pay for all my lessons. So I don't pay for my lessons anymore. Yes, I can understand Norwegian, and Swedish is super close to Norwegian. There's a few things that are a little bit different, but if you learn those few things, it's pretty easy to understand. I can't understand Norwegian very well if it's in a movie, but I can when I talk to them face to face. Should all input be comprehensible? It sort of depends on you. Matt is a big advocate for like non-comprehensible input, and he learned Japanese through starting with stuff that he didn't comprehend at all and just like putting it into a spaced repetition system. Matt is like a Buddhist monk compared to the rest of us in terms of how well he can just sit and focus on something that is hard to focus on. So I don't necessarily recommend that for everyone. I recommend that you can understand enough of it that it's sort of somewhat enjoyable. So that's why like movies that would be enjoyable anyway, because you've still got pictures and music and stuff going on, they can be good. I don't recommend starting at 0, but it depends on you. If you've got a huge control over your focus, then you can start with stuff that's completely incomprehensible and use a spaced repetition system to learn it. Matt is really the expert on this. Yeah. When do you plan? me, you, weeaboo. Matt reaches a higher tier of enlightenment every single month. Yes, he does. When do you next plan on going to Sweden? You mean when do I plan on going at all? I go into this a little bit in my how to. I learned a language in 57 hours for 57 hours in 1 week. I was thinking about Sweden, so I said in 57 hours because they would say I 57 timmar. When it's possible, when it's financially and like life situationally possible. Would you ever move to Sweden? I have actually thought about it. I mean, I'm married with 2 kids now, but we thought about moving to Sweden for an opportunity that was there about 2 years ago, but obviously there's huge difficulties with that. I don't think my mum would be heaps happy about it. How is my Swedish right now? I mean, it's pretty good. I could answer in Swedish, but I don't think many people will understand it. Do you have a vocabulary storage system? I sort of use Anki on and off, but not really. A note-taking app. I want to start using Notion if maybe. What's your method? I was using this book. It's also my mouse pad, but I don't know. I said before, I'm not actually that good at like setting something up that I want to stick to. Anki would be the closest that I've ever had. You need to do an interview with PewDiePie. You know what? I'm going to do a video about why it's, I don't know exactly, I don't want to say too much about it in case it's not what I'd say it's going to, what it's going to be. But I want to do a video about all the people that I would like to collab or do interviews with, not necessarily just YouTubers, just everyone, and why PewDiePie would or would not be included in that. And I think it's a would be included in that. But yeah, because that's a big, like, you don't just, one does not simply interview, one does not simply collab with PewDiePie. But that's a thing, and there'd be a reason as to why I was doing that. There'd be a reason for me doing that, as opposed to just going because he's a big YouTuber and I want to do that. Like, I want to collaborate with some really small YouTubers too, because they're the sorts of people. Clickbait title: While I'll never interview PewDiePie. Did I just stuff it up again? Why I'll never interview PewDiePie. That would be a great clickbait title. But except that it would have to be the other way, because I think the answer would be that I'd actually love to interview PewDiePie. Italo, it's hard to answer your question. I am fluent in Swedish. It's just stages of fluency, right? I'm not like a native in Swedish, and I'm not like highly proficient in Swedish, but I am fluent in Swedish. I mean, I can speak Swedish comfortably and keep the whole conversation in that and talk about most things that I want to talk about in Swedish. So I am fluent in it. But the person who says, hej, jag lär mig också svenska nu eftersom jag såg dina videos. You just made a mistake that I made quite often when I was at your stage of learning. The present form of att lära is lär. So jag lär mig också, not lära. Yeah. What is your honest opinion on the fluent in X months, I learn X days in 7 days, YouTube polyglots? It's not about what's my honest opinion. It's more about what my nuanced opinion is. That is, like, it's more complicated than I could express in that stupid video that I did like 9 months ago. It wasn't a good video. I don't like it. But I should have said clearly in that video, I didn't have a problem with the clickbait. I get the thing to click, right? I've made like clickbaity kind of things before as well. If you make a video, you put a lot of hard work and effort into it, and you want people to click on it. That's fair enough. What I didn't like was that in Nathaniel's video particularly, and I'll get to Ikenna in a second. It's not Ikenna. I pronounced it wrong in that video. It's Ikenna. I'll get to him in a second. With Nathaniel's video, it's that the video actually did portray a reality that wasn't reality, right? So it did show him learning Italian in 7 days, even though that wasn't true, right? So he skips over it. He's like, oh yeah, I've been studying on and off for 18 months. Whoa, 18 months? Hang on. Then you've been studying it for 18 months. Okay, don't try and play that down. And then he sort of, he speaks it, and it's clear that he actually speaks it a little bit more than he's letting on, because the thoughts seem to be coming to him, even though very slowly, yes, but in Italian. So it kind of, that kind of annoyed me. Yes, I get the video. I get that the video is more about how far you can go in 1 week, but I'm going to be perfectly honest about this. I think Nathaniel loves to look amazing on camera. Like, he loves to look like, oh, I'm not doing that much. I'm just like learning this and this and this. But he loves people looking at him and going, wow, like that guy's amazing and he's really modest and stuff. That's my opinion. And yes, I have watched his video that's called like For Those Feeling Discouraged or whatever, where he talks about reality in film and like how it's never how it is and stuff. And it's like, yes, but most films are not trying to portray a reality, right? Christopher Nolan is not trying to convince us that Batman is real. I feel like Nathaniel is trying to convince us that he is very good at picking up languages as quickly as it appears as though he's picking them up even though he's not. And yes, I've also watched his Portuguese one, and I could also do a response saying why I don't think that's legit, but it would be such a big video. It would have to be like 40 minutes long. But as for Ikenna's wasn't the same, and I didn't watch the part 2 of his video where he actually says that he's not a Spanish speaker. But I mean, he did mention in his comment on my video that he's like, it kind of was a bit silly of me to not put that in part 1. I only put it in part 2. So, you know, I didn't have all the information. Also, I'd probably leave Ikenna out of that video if I did it again. And I also want to mention that for those of you who have not caught up with his channel, he's very sick at the moment. He's not quite sure what the problem is. And no doctors and stuff seem to be able to identify the problem. He's living in Belgium. He can't move. And so he's trying to communicate with French doctors and stuff. And he's admitting that even that makes it difficult. So, yeah, like, he's sick, and I hope he gets better soon. For Zurify, you should watch Captain Sinbad's Watches Nathaniel Drew Once video. Oh, I have. I love Captain Sinbad. He's actually my favorite YouTuber. And I've gotten in touch with him on Instagram. He's super cool guy. Big fan of Nikhil. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about Nathaniel Drew. I think if that doesn't get me into trouble saying that, then yeah. Okay, we're going over a lot of the same questions now. I've never personally used Asimal. I've said that a few times now. Why the channel has no super chat? I thought about super chats because I do need to make money from this for it to be not this stream from YouTube, for it to be viable for me to keep doing it, because otherwise I could definitely make more money just working more. But super chat, I'm kind of uncomfortable with at this stage, because I don't think my advice is worth, like, I don't think my ability to answer someone's question is worth like direct money, like them going like, here, I'll pay you $5, you answer my question. I might not be able to give a $5 answer. If I was Matt, I feel like I would be able to give a $5 answer or a $3 answer or whatever, or Luca, but I'm not that, and I don't try to appear like I know everything. Hopefully I've been honest in this live stream about like things that I struggle to have in place, even though I would recommend that people do them. I'm not always that great at following my own advice. So I'm not always the best person to give advice, and I don't have all the answers. And it's like, I just would feel uncomfortable when I haven't reached a C level in at least one language. I would feel uncomfortable about having people directly pay me for answers. Yeah, okay, Ventrix, fair enough, your advice is worth it, but people super chat just to show support, not necessarily for the answer itself. Yeah, I don't know. You're going to cop flack either way. Like, some people are going to be like, some people are going to be like you guys, like, it's fine, like, if you do super chat, like, it's, and other people are like, how dare you monetize? Like, man, you should have seen some of the responses I got about just even having a Patreon, even though the way I said it was like clearly like I wasn't a big fan of having a Patreon. Because every YouTuber and his dog, as I said, has a Patreon. Some people were like, hey, like, what do you think you're doing? And it's like, well, I'm trying to make a living. Okay, thanks, Ibrahim. Thanks for being here. You've been here a while. Ross W, I do have Patreon set up and have the rewards be ways that people can contribute to my channel. I do have Patreon set up now. Even that I feel guilty about, because I've got a $6 tier that I'm about to add some more content to that they're not currently getting, and a $4 tier that's currently exactly the same as the $6 tier, because I was like, the $6 tier is just ridiculous. No one's getting $6 value out of that. So I made a $4 tier that was meant for people who are meant to go from the $6 tier down to the $4 tier, but a lot of people didn't. Thank you guys, you're awesome. But now I want to add some material to the $6 tier that no one else sees, and there's just a $1 just general support. But I even felt bad about that because Matt versus Japan has it now. I get it's totally different for him because he's got like 1,400 patrons, so he can afford to have lower priced tiers and still make money from that. But he has a $5 tier that is such amazing value, and probably even his $3 tier is pretty good. But I'm on his $5 tier myself, and it's just so good. I'm like, oh man, how can I charge $4 for what I offer? How much do I read in Swedish? At the moment, I'm really enjoying the book that I'm reading. It's a great book. And so I'm reading about 2 hours a day. Yesterday, I listened to it for 4 hours because I had 3 hours of driving for work. And then when I got home, I read with the book and the audio for an hour. About 2 hours a day in general. Cold tea. What do you think? I said before that I was going to wrap it up, but then I was actually feeling a bit hungry, and then I sort of stopped feeling hungry. But it's almost gone for 2 hours now. So I'm going to say I'll wrap it up in 10 minutes. We've got 10 minutes more. I'll answer what comes up. Sorry if I didn't get to your question. I'll try and maybe get back to some of them in the comments or on Instagram or something. Colty, what do you think about this quote? The only way to become excellent is to be endlessly fascinated over doing the same thing over and over. You have to fall in love with boredom. I don't think you have to fall in love with boredom, but I do think you have to do the same thing over and over, even if the same thing can vary in what it is. So I would more agree with like you have to become endlessly fascinated with reaching a very slightly higher level of being able to achieve a very slightly different thing to what you can already achieve in a way. It really depends what it is, but I don't think you need to be fascinated with boredom, because at the moment I'm not at all bored by Swedish, but that's because I've gotten it to the level where I'm reading stuff that's meant for adults. So the material itself is interesting to me. Maybe if you wanted to be really good at... No, I don't think anyone's ever going to be fascinated by something that they're actually bored with. So I kind of don't agree. Okay. Hej, förstår du mig nå? Från Norge? Ja, jag förstår det. Men som du kanske hörde, det var... Jag läste din mening med ett svenskt uttal. Så. Men jag förstår vad du säger. Absolut. What should I do if I'm going back and forth between two languages? What are some standards to choose the one to go for? Go for the one you like more. Or, no, sorry. Go for the one you're better at. The one you're better at, get it to a high level, and then go to the one. And if you're not better at either of them, go for the one that you think is going to be easier to reach a high level in, I would say. Because you want to make sure there's a big difference between them. So one of the reasons I went for Swedish, for many reasons, but one of them was because I was already slightly better at it. Yep. As far as I know, you only learn French and Swedish, but on your shelf, there's a few books about other languages. Yeah, well, I decided in about November last year or something that I would just fill my shelf up with as many language learning books or Swedish or French books as possible. So it's just they're just on my shelf. Sometimes I get them from the library, I won't borrow them from the library. The library's selling them for like $1, and I'll just get them. So there's just anything that's a language that's under about $5, I'll just buy it and put it on the shelf. $5 Australian, that is. Turkish isn't. I don't have a Turkish book though. Is Mako Mermaids a popular show in Australia? I've heard of it, but I don't really know what's popular in Australia because we don't really watch that much TV. I know what my son watches, but din svenska on the spot var skitbra, tack. Jag skulle inte hålla med dig, men det... If you're currently learning French with Link and you're enjoying Link, then keep doing Link. My opinion on Link doesn't matter if you enjoy Link. Beginner courses are too easy and advanced content is too hard. They're more tolerance for discomfort, more tolerance for ambiguity, that is not understanding the language. If you listen to it more and read it more, you will learn to understand more. It's just about slowly narrowing that gap between what is comfortable and what you can't yet understand. Is Swedish or French closer to English? French is closer to English, at least in terms of vocabulary. Definitely in terms of vocabulary, it's a lot closer to English. Not to say Swedish is a long way, but French is definitely closer. Grammatically, Swedish is most of the time closer, but then some of the reason that English grammar is so messed up sometimes is that, like, not all the time, but sometimes French, because we were a Germanic language and then we stole a whole lot from French, including the word order in quite a lot of cases. So if you say, like, yesterday I went to the shops, in Swedish or in German or in Dutch or any of the Germanic languages, you would say, yesterday went I to the shops. But in French, you would say, yesterday I went to the shops. So we've stolen some grammar from French. But then other times, you can say, like, in English, you can say, like, only in extreme cases would he say that. Only in extreme cases would he advise that you do this, which is clause, or subclause, verb, and then clause, or whatever it is. I don't know. So only in extreme cases would he advise that. That's taken from the Germanic structure, and the French would never say that. So it's, yeah, but see, Anna, like, English, West Germanic, Swedish, North Germanic, French is a Romance language. Yeah, but in the end, like, English is only West Germanic, like, formally on the tree. We've stolen so much from French that I think French is now closer. Like, in terms of vocabulary, maybe you've not looked at French before, but if you look at French, it's extremely close vocabulary-wise to English. No, Sefama, I don't agree. In what, like, it's like 70% of English vocabulary is found somewhere in French. Easier. Again, easier is a very relative, like, it sort of depends on the person. I find French easier because one of the hardest things I find about Swedish is the accent. And my French accent is naturally quite good, whereas my Swedish accent, I had to work on to even get it anywhere close, and it's still not that close. Does Swedish have cases? No, not in the way that you mean it. It has some, like, for all the personal pronouns, but that's like English has them as well. Okay, we're probably about to wrap it up. Yes, Swedish has no cases, but a shitload of other tricky things. Thanks, Anna. That's, like, Swedish is not a hard language. I'm not going to sit here and with other Chinese learners here and whatever and say that Swedish is a hard language, but it does have a shitload of tricky things. That's true. Just like things where the better you get, you're like, oh, hang on, that's not how they would say it. And I just find French easier in that, like, a lot of it seems closer on a macro level. Like, the way they express ideas is generally a little bit closer, whereas Swedes tend to say things a little bit differently. Woher kommen Sie? Someone asked that before. I don't understand German, but I know what that means. Woher kommen Sie? I am from a city slightly south of Sydney. Yeah, Anna, sorry, I wasn't disagreeing with you that Swedish is classified as English is classified as West Germanic, but I'm just saying that in actual content today, French is definitely closer. You can, like, I have a French book, a novel, that I can read and actually make sense of what is going on. And my French is nowhere near as good as my Swedish now, Whereas, like, so my French reading is almost up to my Swedish reading, even though my Swedish is way better. So, I mean, that's... Do you understand Danish? Because many Swedes and Norwegians don't at all. Yeah, like sometimes, but not that well. I can understand it when it's written down most of the time, but I can't understand it when it's spoken. I think Norwegians understand Danish pretty well. I've had a lot of Norwegians tell me that they understand Danish fine. What's your day job, if I may ask? I'm a photographer, but I'm a product photographer of large industrial products, basically. So we have like a very specific kind of way that we have to take photos of the things we have to take photos of, and we have to go to different places, which is why I mentioned way before that I was at an Italian English bilingual school, where we have to take photos of products in their working environment, and we have to make the light good and everything. Yes, Wollongong, Christopher. Someone I didn't really finish answering that question. I'm from Wollongong, which is about an hour south of Sydney. It's the 10th largest city in Australia, as far as I know, in terms of population. It's on the Australian east coast, towards the bottom near Sydney. If you look up where Sydney is, that's basically where Wollongong is. Someone else, do you understand Norwegian? And I think someone else is asking that. Yes, he does. Yeah, mostly. What do you think that Dutch guy that talks to random people on the streets, apparently speaks like 20 languages? I don't know how you pronounce his name. I think it's Wouter. That's not my style of... He's fine. I don't have anything against Wouter, and he's not claiming to speak the language as well, I don't think. He's also extremely tall. He's Dutch, so it's probably not that unusual, but like the guy is like ridiculously tall. No, Cefe, I'm not still learning French. If you look at my video called I Quit French, which strangely went viral. Okay, I could sit here just having a chat with you guys all day, but rank the YouTube polyglots. Well, no, I'm not doing that. People will just wind up offended. My favorite language learning channel is Matt versus Japan, and he's not a polyglot. Well, he doesn't claim to be one, in that he only speaks Japanese and English well, and then speaks Chinese. Speaks Chinese a little bit, or is learning Chinese at least. I want to keep sitting here all day, but yeah, I have to go and have a coffee or a second coffee and breakfast and everything. Thanks everyone for being here. Yeah, there's a good reason I'm not on Twitter, because it's a hate fest. And no, it's just a waste of time, in my opinion. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks for getting the channel to 30,000 subs. I hope this wasn't too rambly, as I say in lots of my videos. Cool, guys. I'm going to peace out, and I'll try and get back to you with answers to questions. See you later.